Hi students, my name's Chris and I'm from the Office of Fair Trading's Buy Smart team, and welcome to this online video presentation. So today we're going to be talking about your consumer rights and responsibilities. This presentation is designed for students in years 7, 8 and 9, so if that's you, welcome. There's also some information here that's going to be relevant to students in older grades. So if that's you, feel free to follow along, and there's plenty of information and resources that you can find on our website that can help extend your learning. Alright, let's get into it. What we're going to do today is we're going to go through some scenarios that are going to go through how consumer law applies here in Australia to particular types of circumstances. Each of them is going to end with a yes or no question, and that means you guys are going to be able to have an answer to that question. Before I actually go any further, I'd like you to think about it and come up with a reason just for yourself as to why you think the answer might be yes or no. So my first scenario for us today is Phil's story. Now Phil runs a small business as a travel agent. He works hard in promotions and marketing in order to grow his business. Now during the winter school holidays, he places this ad in his business's social media account. Let's have a look at what the ad says. You may note that there is a bit of fine print at the bottom of this ad. And in fact, the fine print is kind of hard to read. It's white text on a background of snow. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to make it stand out for you a bit. So having a look at the ad, having a closer look at what the fine print is actually saying, has Phil actually done something wrong? Now the answer for this one is yes. Now, the rules here are all about what we call false and misleading representations, basically things to do with false advertising. A business must not mislead consumers about the price or value of their product or service. Now this, in terms of the price, can include not disclosing the total price or hiding it in the fine print, or it might be only advertising a component price, which is a fraction of the total price, and it doesn't account for things that might be included as mandatory costs. For instance, if you're shopping online and there's a transaction fee. So there is a rule that the business must advertise what we call the single price. Now the single price is the total minimum price that the consumer will have to pay in order to purchase a product or service. Now it's going to include all of the charges, including any transaction charges, taxes, GST, all of those sorts of things. So if they are going to advertise a component of the price, they will also need to advertise equally prominently the total minimum price that you as the consumer are going to have to pay. That could be if it was, for instance, 6 easy payments of $300 to buy a furniture set. They would also need to be able to display for you that the total price that you're going to pay is $1,800. Now the value side of it is an interesting one as well, and that's going to be applying with Phil's scenario particularly as well. Now if we go back and have a look at Phil's ad, he's kind of promising some value in this ad that his service is not going to deliver. That big prominent headline, learn to ski. Well, in his fine print he disclaims that ski lessons aren't included. He advertises about continental breakfasts, about mountain villas. Neither of these are included either. The other thing that may be misleading for people is the use of the photo that he's chosen. Now, as you can see, we are learning to ski in the Southern Alps. Southern Alps, for those who don't do geography, you can find them in New Zealand. That photo that Phil has found, though, was taken in Switzerland. The ski conditions of Switzerland compared to the ski conditions of New Zealand may well be completely different. And if somebody looks at that photo taken in Switzerland and reasonably infers that that is the nature of the ski conditions in the Southern Alps, and if they arrive at the Southern Alps and they find that that is not the case, then that picture, not just the text, may also be considered misleading. Now, one of the things that businesses are not allowed to do is hide things in the fine print. Now, fine print can be really important if they've got a lot of detail to explain to you as the customer. That's why it's always important to be able to read it. But they can't hide things in the fine print. They can't change the nature of the offer that you thought you were signing up for. Learn to ski in the Southern Alps. ski lessons not included. That is changing the nature of what it looks like you're agreeing to. And even the fact that he's chosen a white font on a background of snow. If you as a reasonable consumer can't really read that, then the court is likely to decide that that fine print is illegible and for all intents and purposes does not exist. So all of that fine print for Phil there may as well have not even been there if the court deems that it is illegible. What Phil may have to do is have to go back and correct that ad and think really carefully about all of those issues before he posts it to his social media account. Let's move on to our next scenario. So this is Nick's story. Now Nick is at the shops with his best mate when they see a new deodorant being advertised on an electronic billboard. Nick rushes off to buy it. Nick and his mate both rush home to try the new deodorant that night, but they do not experience the results that they see in the ad. Ad promises that you will completely transform your physical appearance into something with a popped collar and a cool hairdo. Now, has this deodorant business done something wrong? Have a think about this. Now, for this scenario, my answer is no. And this is because this is a form of advertising technique that we call puffery. And puffery includes things like wild exaggerations, fanciful or fantastical elements, or vague assertions. So anything that is so over the top that a reasonable person would not assume that it is a statement of fact. If it does make use of fantasy or magic or implausibility, then that counts as puffery. A reasonable person would interpret that as creative license, as opposed to a statement of fact. Whereas if Pop Collar Dude turns to camera at the end of the ad and says, also works as an antiperspirant for a period of 48 hours. That is the statement of fact that we would be looking at as being something that the business would need to prove in order to avoid this being a misleading statement. So a vague assertion. Now, if you've ever been to a bakery, you've probably seen that they have the world's best pies. That particular statement, it is quite vague. World's best pies according to who? According to the baker that made them? According to mum? According to you? According to me? If they were to say something more definitive, like prize-winning pies, then that's not a vague statement anymore. We can pin it down into, okay, what was the prize? What were the criteria? When did you win it? Da, 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 da. And then they would have to be able to prove that statement was true. So for Nick to look at that initial ad and assume that it meant that that can of deodorant would physically transform him into a more attractive self, he was probably not being a reasonable consumer. So let's move on to our next scenario, and that's Amal's story. A man in Amal's English speaking class offers her a today-only deal on a new phone. She won't have time to think about it or to get help in understanding it. So she agrees to sign up, but isn't given a copy of that contract. A few months later, when she first sees the bill, this is what she sees. Should Amal be expected to be held to this contract? Now, my answer to this one is no, and there's a couple of things that are going to come into this scenario. So one of the things that we think is really important at the Office of Fair Trading is that businesses are dealing fairly and honestly with all consumers, but particularly those who are vulnerable. And they could be vulnerable for a number of reasons. In Amal's case, we know that she doesn't really understand English because she's there learning it, and we know that that salesperson knew that as well because that's where he approached her. So if he knows that she doesn't read and understand English, and he doesn't give her the chance to read and understand that contract, he doesn't give her the opportunity to take it away to somebody who can help her to read and understand it, he's likely to be exploiting her vulnerability there. And that would trigger some of the rules that apply in the Australian consumer law about what we call unconscionable conduct. So conduct is unconscionable if it is so far outside of what is an ethically standard practice that a reasonable person would look at that and think, that's not on. So we would interpret that to include taking advantage of vulnerable people. That could be somebody learning English like a mile. It could be somebody who has a cognitive or emotional disability. If a business is trying to take advantage of one of those sorts of things, particularly by using high-pressure sales techniques that don't take no for an answer, that don't give them the opportunity to think about it, that don't give them the opportunity to get advice, to get assistance, then that could very well trigger the definition of unconscionable conduct. So now we're going to look at some more day-to-day things to do with returns and refunds and when we're entitled to them. And I'm going to get us started by talking about Arabella's story. So Arabella is a keen diver. Her regular supply shop is having a sale on all diving watches, and so she takes the opportunity to buy one. Her new watch clogs up and stops working on her first dive with it. She heads back to the shop for a refund, but when she gets there, she sees this sign. Now, for the purposes of the exercise, let's imagine that this sign has been there at least from the point that she bought the watch. So in that case, does Arabella have the right to expect to get a refund? Now the answer for this one is yes. And this comes to do with an area of the Australian consumer law that has to do with what we call consumer guarantees. Now, a consumer guarantee is a promise that a business makes to you as the consumer. And it is the minimum standard promise of what you're going to be purchasing when you walk out with that product or service. Now, there are 9 consumer guarantees that a business makes to you for a product. There are 3 for services, and they will always apply to any product or any service that you buy anywhere in Australia, including online. You can go and have a look at our website, find out exactly what those consumer guarantees entitle you to. But as a general statement, they make promises with relation to whether or not the product works. Does it do its job? It relates to how the product is described to you at the point in which you buy it. And it makes promises about who owns or has an interest in that product. So when you buy something, you have the right to own it and use it. So one of those guarantees is a guarantee of acceptable quality. So for Arabella's diving watch, the business should be able to guarantee to her that it will be safe, that it will have a good appearance, that it will work, and that it will be durable, which means it will work for a reasonable time. Now, for Arabella's watch, it stopped working on her first dive. It clogged up with water right away. Now, that does not meet the minimum standard of workability that you as a reasonable consumer would expect. And regardless of what a shop's refund policy or returns policy says, the law says that you as a consumer have the right to get a problem like that remedied. And a remedy could be a refund, could be a replacement, it could be compensation for a drop in value. Where a fault is so major that you as the consumer would not have bought that item or that service if you'd known about the fault, then you as the consumer have the right to choose what remedy you want. So if Arabella wants a refund, then she is absolutely entitled to it. Let's move on to my next scenario, which is Jahim's story. So Jahim and his partner are nearly at their 6-month anniversary. So Jahim's a bit of a romantic at heart, and he really wants to find that perfect gift, so he's been out shopping and looking and hunting. So at a local jewellery store, he finds a really cute locket and he buys it to be the present. However, less than a week before the big day, poor Jahim gets the dreaded breakup text. Is Jahim entitled to a refund on that locket? Now, unfortunately for the romantics out there, the answer for Jahim is no. Your consumer guarantee rights apply to when a product or a service is faulty. They do not apply if you simply change your mind. And the law will consider something to be a change of mind if, for instance, you are giving or receiving an unwanted gift, if you simply picked the wrong size, color, or style, Or if you've walked out of the shop and around the corner to the next shop and you found that same product there for cheaper. So we've established that Jaheem is not automatically entitled to a refund on that locket, but is he okay to ask for one anyway? And of course he is. There's nothing to stop Jaheem from going back to that shop and negotiating with the shopkeeper to determine if they will give him a refund. If they will or won't is up to the shop, is up to that shop's refund and returns policies. They can apply whatever refund and return policy they like when it's a change of mind purchase. If it was a faulty product, they would have to comply with the Australian consumer law. But for a change of mind, they can set their own guidelines. So Jaheem might come up to the shopkeeper at that jewellery store and he might turn on the waterworks. And he might make that shopkeeper so uncomfortable that the shopkeeper says, all right, I'll give you store credit. And for Jaheem, I would say that's probably a good outcome for him. So let's move on then to Kira's story. So Kira's shopping online for some t-shirts. She finds an awesome design that she really loves and she ticks a checkbox to get it delivered in red. 3 weeks later, the package arrives on her doorstep and she opens it to find a green shirt. Is Kira entitled to expect a replacement on this shirt? Now, as we established with Jaheem's story, if you simply pick the wrong size, color or style, that's classed as a change of mind. But this is a slightly different scenario. She's checked that box to get a red shirt. So what's happened is that the product has been described to her as being a red shirt. And so under your consumer guarantee rights, you are entitled to expect that the product that you buy or the service that you're delivered will match that description. So a description could be that checkbox. It could be a listing in a catalog or advertisement. It could be words or images that are provided in the packaging of that product. It could be a sample. It could be a color swatch if you're looking to repaint your room, for instance. It could be a demonstration model if you're trying out that bike before you buy it. All of those things are classed as descriptions in the eyes of the Australian consumer law. And if a product is unable to match that description, then that is a fault that you can get remedied. So Lynn's excited about the new tablet she just bought. She loves its features and has spent all day figuring out how to use it. So she's excited to show off a new app to her best mate. And she drops the tablet and that happens. Is Lynn entitled to a refund? Well, strictly speaking, in the eyes of the consumer law, no, she's not. She does not have a consumer right that guarantees her that she can expect to get a fault repaired if she caused that fault herself. Generally, a consumer cannot seek a remedy for faults or issues caused by situations where they break or lose the product themselves, where they cannot prove the purchase, such as with a receipt, but not only a receipt, could be things like a credit card statement, it could be a serial number for certain types of products, or if they have used the product for more than a reasonable time. So if you're outside the reasonable life of that product. And that is going to depend on what the product is and what's reasonably expected for how long that product should last. So if you were to buy a refrigerator, that would reasonably be expected to last for a lot longer than the ice cream that you put inside it. So for Lynn, with her dropped tablet, she may have purchased a warranty or been provided a warranty at the point where she bought the product, and that might entitle her to get a problem fixed if she's broken the product in the way that she has. But that's the details of an agreement that she and the supplier have made. It's not a consumer guarantee right, and if she hasn't agreed to purchase that warranty, or if she doesn't have a warranty automatically attached when she purchased it, then she doesn't automatically get that right. So our final scenario is Ed. So Ed always parks his car on the driveway at his mum's place. So while his car is away for a service, his mum has arranged to get the driveway professionally cleaned. Now, after the mechanic replaced the old oil filter, Ed's car starts to leak oil, and the leak also did this to Mum's newly cleaned driveway. Now, my question to you is in two parts. Should the mechanic be held responsible for fixing the oil leak? And should the mechanic also be held responsible for getting that driveway repaired? Now my answer for this one is actually yes to both. Now under the consumer guarantee rules, a consumer is entitled to seek a solution from a business where a faulty product or service was supplied by the business, as we've just discussed. So either the product was faulty in terms of the filter itself, or the service, where it was fitted by the mechanic, that may well have been faulty as well. Either way, the business was the one that supplied that, the mechanic was the one that supplied that, and the mechanic is responsible for resolving that issue. They are also responsible for anything that is reasonably foreseeable as a direct consequence of that fault. And because we live on a planet where there is gravity, and the oil is going to leak, and Ed commonly parks his car on that driveway, which is a reasonable place to park it, that is damage that is a direct consequence. Therefore, he is entitled to ask for the business to resolve that damage, and that might be by hiring another professional cleaning job. Now, while Ed takes the car back to the mechanic to get that service done, assume for a moment that the dog runs out the little doggy door, does little scooches across the oil patch, and then inside again and scooches all over Mum's carpet. That's no longer a direct consequence. So that would not be something that the business would be held responsible for. So guys, I hope you've learned something new and interesting about how your consumer rights apply here in Australia. Under the Australian consumer law, these consumer guarantee rights and these rules about how businesses are allowed to engage in their sales practices apply all across Australia, and they are enforced by jurisdictions including the Office of Fair Trading here in Queensland as a uniform set of rules. Now I hope you've learned something new and interesting, and have a talk with your mum or dad or with your siblings, or if you're in class, have a chat with your classmates about some of the things that you've learnt today. And just before we finish, if you've been really interested in the sorts of things that we've talked about in today's session, you may like to look at it as something that you can develop a BuySmart competition entry on. So we run the BuySmart competition every year at the Office of Fair Trading. You can find out all about it by visiting our website, www.qld.gov.au/BuySmartComp. There are $15,000 worth of prizes to win, and you can have a lot of fun while you're doing it. So I hope you had a really good session today and that you've learned something interesting. I'll see you next time. Bye.